Welcome back for another episode of BPL TV. As always, I'm here in the studio.
Micah Gibbs with
Liam Mucklow. All right, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about the pelvis and how it rotates in the negative move or the load.
Ooh, okay. Now for a guy who doesn't really know baseball but spent a lot of time with 3D and biomechanics, that was a big sentence. So
It's one of the biggest ones I've had, I think.
let's decode some of the words there. So negative move is defined by when the player reaches negative move, when their nose is no longer moving away from the pitcher.
Correct.
So that's what we're looking is how the pelvis moves, from from when I'm starting
Right.
back to that
You
point.
start when you're ready to transition into moving towards the pitcher and starting your swing.
And then you talked about rotation and loading. And This is where I want to set the table with some basic information because there's a lot of ways to rotate. So I want you to imagine, this is trail femur, okay? And, it sits in the hip socket, and this is the pelvis. So I can rotate, and I can rotate everything over here to you. Now I rotated my imaginary pelvis almost 90 degrees, but I would say there's no load. For the context of some of the analysis we're going to provide you, that's rotation without load.
Right.
Rotation with load would be, maintaining stability with the femur and the pelvis rotating around that ball and socket joint.
Right.
And that's what's going to allow us opportunity to get, maximum force from the skeletal muscles.
Right. And that's why I prefer the term negative move, because some people load, some people
don't load. All right. So I'll tell you what, let's get in. So here's what we're going to do. Mike is going to go through, he's going to analyze a couple of swings we've had from players coming through the lab. We're going to look at that in 2D video, stuff you're used to seeing as a coach.
Yep.
Then I'm going to bust out some 3D system, and I'm going to show you how we go beyond video and can actually read loading using 3D motion capture.
Right. Yep.
Sound good?
Perfect.
All right, let me get you queued up here.
Yep.
There we are. All right.
There we go. All right, so what we have here is we have two different players of two very different skill sets. So the guy here on the left, he is a second round draft pick and a pretty good hitter, obviously.
Better than average?
Yeah, better than average.
Right.
So what you're seeing here is he's going into that negative move, and then we've paused him at the end of that negative move. So what I'm going to do here is draw a line that kind of shows you where that backside is pointed, where his hips are pointed, and as you can see, it's almost pointed to where the shortstop would be, and he's getting a lot of that kind of loading with the hips.
Yep.
Whereas the player on the right is a youth player that, as we see here, doesn't have quite as much of a negative move, and we've stopped him, and now his hips, before he's even starting his swing, or his hips are actually opened up towards the second baseman already. So that's showing that when we don't get that proper loading of the hips, when we do make that forward move towards the pitcher, a lot of times we fly open without even thinking we're doing anything.
Interesting. That just even listening to the way you talk about that, it makes me think like trying to jump without hip hinging.
Right.
Hard thing to do.
Very.
Right, because that hip hinge is what allows the load to happen, the stretch shorten cycle to engage, and everyone to explode.
So when you see the players, a lot of times what you'll see is, especially with youth players, is they rock back towards the catcher.
Right.
There's no rotation, no loading.
Okay.
Sometimes though you will see what looks like a load, but really, like you said, they're just rotating everything.
Right.
Everything's turning, and there's still no load. There's no building up to fire and go forward.
Right.
So, did you want to talk about that from a 3D motion standpoint?
Yeah. So now we're in my world here, squiggly lines, and I'm going to highlight the opportunity that this load, the correct load, and the negative move affords us when we start to, try and hit the ball, start to move back forward towards the pitcher.
Right.
So what you're able to see on this stuff here behind me is essentially a bunch of squiggly lines. Okay. And this is, this is from the draft pick. Okay, so I want you to take a look at the amount of time where that red squiggly line is actually above the green squiggly line. Okay, and what this is showing, when that red line is peaking up, that's that player's pelvis rotating towards the target. okay? And when the green line peaks up, that's their upper body rotating towards the target. And when I have that efficient load of pelvis rotating into femur like we saw in the one player, we get a great amount of separation. So what I want you to understand is the more separation we have between those segments, the more power that person is getting from that part of their body. In this particular case, we would refer to this as the core length, these core muscles, that are going to connect the pelvis where that sensor is, and are going to connect the upper torso where the other sensor is. So we know they're generating a tremendous amount of power from here in the core. Now I want you to take a look here as I go and I switch scene. You're going to see that gap between the red and green ones shrink. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to go back again one more time. You see how much area there is in between those? That red goes up a long way before, and there's a big gap between. That's a big core load. And now when we take a look at it, we see the red doesn't start to peak up as early and compared to the upper body. So in this particular case, it's almost like, not only is there less separation, but everything is rotating towards the target early.
Right. Yeah. And by looking at that, when I see that as with a hitter, what I'm seeing is that player is creating zero explosiveness.
Right.
They're probably gonna, I don't know, maybe make contact a little more often potentially, because there's not as much that they're having to sync up. But at the same time, again, there's no power.
So let's talk about a few things that you should look for with your players when they go out. There are simple ways to even train it. Okay, so what's first thing you'd want to go and take a look at?
Well, first thing I want to do is put him through a screen.
Okay.
I want to put him through like that, just see if he's got pelvic rotation, if he can even do it.
Okay, so here, I'll hop up.
Yep.
So, all right, what am I gonna do now?
Okay, so you're gonna take your hands, you're gonna put them across your chest just like that. Yep. You're gonna get in a position almost like you're about to shoot a free throw. So feet about hip width apart.
Yep.
Just like that, and you're just gonna try to kind of move your hips around almost like there's a pole going all the way through your body, and you just want to try to rotate the hips.
Keep my shoulders
around.
still?
Keep shoulders still, knees still, everything stays still, just the hip. Yep, perfect. Yep. So you can see there's a little tightness there. Going to the left is probably a little easier.
Yeah, that's a long life of golf.
Yeah.
Right-handed golf right there.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, so once I see that, if I see maybe there is something blocking it off, then obviously we need to see a physical therapist, do some drills to work on that and clean that up a little bit.
So I'm looking at that one. To me, I love that one because that's testing like stability and coordination.
Right.
Let's show, because the other thing we need to know is the actual joint range of motion.
Right.
Okay, so now let's test. If I'm a right-handed batter, how are we going to test my trail hip internal rotation?
So we can do that with, get that same stance that you were in.
Yep.
And we can take the feet and try to go inward with the feet.
Okay,
so almost as if you got about a foot width distance.
Yep.
And you're going to take your foot and try to just move it inward.
So I'm keeping my heel on the ground.
Yep.
And I'm rotating.
Yep.
This way.
Yep. And you're just going to, you can put a bat there if you want, halfway between your feet. And if your toe can touch without the hip kind of pushing forward to try to go past, if you can just pick that toe up and touch the bat.
So
with each foot.
So what is that, about 45 degrees
about 45,
we want to see?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And I got to about 30 right there. So, but that's reality. That's where I'm at. It sucks, but what does that tell you as a coach?
Well, so what that tells me is, one, they're going to probably get a little resistance sooner, so then they're not going to be able to get that full loading.
So you're gonna not want to see as much rotation, right? Because if you try and get me to rotate the same amount that someone that has 45 degrees hip internal rotation, I'd say probably two things are going to happen. Number one is I'll destabilize the joint. Could happen a number of different ways, or I'll just get injured. Whichever.
Yeah. Either one. Neither are good. But the other thing that we'll probably see whenever we're doing that, so what I would almost do is maybe open up that foot a little bit at setup.
Right.
That'll allow them to get that full range of motion if you want to see them in more rotation.
Right. That's one of the things I've been thinking about here is we're really decoding ways to, to set individual foot position to match body movement, and now we've got a way to analyze, am I setting myself up for a powerful positive move?
Right.
All right. That's a wrap?
That's a wrap.
All right. See you guys next time.